Hi everyone, Mark here, and today we're going to be talking about IHTBF. We're going to be talking about subtleties, and we're going to be talking about traveling. For those who are not familiar with the acronym, IHTBF basically stands for it had or it has to be felt. It is an expression that is often used to describe the experience of certain individuals who go into certain dojos and they get overpowered by seemingly little to no force, or basically they get pinned down or controlled or whatnot in a way that is relatively hard to explain and to put in words. Now, before I go further, I think I'd want to present some of my own it had to be felt moment to contextualize how I actually see the expression and to come to the point that I'm actually hoping to do today. The first it had to be felt moment that I had was actually in ground fighting. It was my very first time going and basically doing some sparring, and the person I was practicing with essentially just simply got me into a wrist lock, which is not something you frequently see, I guess, nowadays in BJJ and in other forms of ground fighting. But it was, it caught me off guard, and to the point where, I didn't actually realize at the time that this was basically kind of a checkmate situation. And the person basically just, kept putting pressure, thinking that, my wrist was a little bit more flexible. And I got a little bit hurt on that at that time, right? So it had to be felt. I had to basically learn through essentially trial and error that, if you don't tap, you get in trouble, right? You're going to get hurt. And then, to be fair, I didn't really get injured or anything. It just, overstretched a little bit. The second time that I had it had to be felt moment was when I was sparring with an acquaintance of mine. We were doing basically karate sparring. And he was from a from a taekwondo background, and just completely caught me off guard with a ushirogeri, and he really just precision strike. He just got me straight into the solar plexus. It basically I just fell to the ground, no oxygen. And I struggled for a minute or two, basically, to kind of get back up, between the lack of oxygen and just the sheer pain. And also that was for me it had to be felt moment. It hurts to get hit. Especially if you get hit and you weren't expecting it. And to kind of feel. To get a bit of a sense of how that would feel basically is a good experience if you actually want to be able to develop some abilities that you may wish to be able to use in a practical context should the occasion arise to use those kind of skills. The third it had to be felt moment that I want to talk about today was actually at the Kodokan dojo, basically. So Kodokan is the judo mecca in Tokyo. And during my second trip to Japan, I trained in a variety of practices, one of which was basically judo. Now, I didn't really participate in actual classes. I would just go to the free sparring sessions. So basically, every evening from Monday to Friday, it used to be that you could just go at one of the dojo and essentially, you get there, it costs you maybe, 500 yen, and you get to practice for a couple of hours, basically. And it's really just, sparring. So basically, you try to find a partner and you practice. One of the first few times I went there, I realized there were basically kind of two camps in the way they were divided. You had basically everyone that wasn't ranked, or who was younger, that was sitting on one side of the dojo, and all the old timers, people that were probably fifth dan and up, were sitting on the other side. For them it was basically just their their time of the day where they were just socially gathering and having fun together. But every once in a while you'd have one of the elderies basically come on the side where the young guys are, and just try to find a sparring partner. And on that day it happened to be that one of those gentlemen came to me to practice. He didn't speak much English. Enough for us to communicate. At the time I wasn't, I didn't have any sort of fluency in Japanese. And, we spent most of the time again on the ground. I think he threw me within 5 seconds. And then, spend the next 50 minutes just essentially going from one control to the other every 25 to 30 seconds. And when we finished, he basically just said something like, "Well, how much do you weigh? How tall are you?" And clearly he was smarter than me, and I was one head higher. I was one head taller than he was, and he was much smaller. So, as it turns out, he was, I think, 20 kilos lighter than I was. He was not a big guy, right? But every time he would pin me, it felt like I had this immovable object on me. His controls were perfect. And it was just, I think it was the first time I ever felt something that was just so jarring. Somebody who's basically, physically disadvantaged and was still nevertheless able to control me that easily. I actually want to mention one last moment of it had to be felt, and it was actually also the Kodokan. So same situation. Now one of the elderies actually was always sitting on our side for some reason. He turned out to be somewhat famous in some circles for being one of the last living instructor of Kosen Judo, or at least one of the last specialists of Kosen Judo at the time. Unfortunately, I think he passed away since. And it's, I had a great time with him. I had he would just, spend a lot of time with me, just showing me how he would do the technique. And one of the techniques that he would do was kesakatame, but he would do it in a way where he would basically put my head in a nutcracker between his forearm and his arm, and he would actually get a submission. I would actually have to tap because my jaw would feel like he would essentially pop out, or my head would explode, basically. And that was kind of a moment where I really realized, oh crap, there is really something more to certain of the techniques that, I had failed to realize, right? And I really had to feel that to kind of get a sense that, that was, the real thing. It wasn't just, something. I would have had a hard time to basically perhaps really comprehend the whole thing should it would have been told to me, right? And I could go on and on and on, but you'll notice that none of the examples that I've mentioned here, refer to any mystical power or, things like Aiki or any practices related to Daito-ryu. And you'll also notice that a lot of those practices are basically spread across essentially 2 or 3 continents. I could actually go also in some examples I had in other places around the world. The point I'm trying to make today is twofold. On one hand, it had to be felt isn't something that's as special as it sounds, in the sense that, there's a broad spectrum of experiences that have to be felt for a certain type of wisdom to be internalized, right? it's like Mike Tyson said, like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. But if you've never been punched in the face, it's a little bit hard to actually comprehend what the actual moral lesson is here. Somebody who's never been struck will have a harder time to fully understand, what kind of state it leaves you in, and how much harder it's going to be to basically dig yourself out of that situation in some cases. And the second point is, and it's kind of related to the first one, but you have to travel. You have to get out of your of your dojo, and you have to let people challenge you. One other thing that I find personally problematic is that often, not always, in some cases, I think the term is used in a way that's legitimate and to basically, make sure that certain amount of history is recorded, so to speak, about certain events. But in many cases, it's kind of used in a way to dismiss criticism, right? Whereas, or to say basically, well, you'd have to come and see us to be able to get a feeling of it, right? And the thing is that there may be some truth to that, but at the same time, it doesn't mean you cannot engage in some sort of conversation, nor does it mean that the individual emitting a criticism or a comment doesn't have the kind of experience that's gained through travel. It doesn't mean that person hasn't seen so many things that perhaps they may be able to see something that you, at the level you're at, you can only feel. So that's all the point I wanted to make today. Basically, it had to be felt, or it has to be felt. Yes, a lot of martial practice, and it's not limited to Daito-ryu, is experiential in nature. You have to experience it to really kind of get, to learn something, right? It's why the teaching model is a lot closer to apprenticeship, where you basically you stick with a set of senior individual and they kind of teach you the ropes by doing, than it is something that's more pedagogical in nature. You kind of have to have that human connection to be able to, on one hand, make sure that the information is conveyed if you're on the senior side, and on the other hand, to really kind of get the experience viscerally if you're the person learning. But it's not a defense for when you put a video out there and people are starting to emit doubt or criticism about it, right? If they end up being critical about what you put out there, then maybe you should wonder whether you could have done a better job in terms of communication. Maybe not putting that kind of video out, or maybe putting a video out that basically would have been able to convey something of value to the audience. That's it for today. As always, if you have any comments or criticism or whatnot, please feel free to put them down in the comments down below. Thank you for your time, and until next time.